Welcome back, my friends. I had an idea and I thought we'll give it a go, so bear with me and listen carefully. How good is choice? How great is having options? Because that's what this video is going to do for you right now. Option A, sit back and relax and don't do a thing and just go on a standard what do you mean journey and watch about half an hour of American cable TV news, series of different channels reporting on the same thing. So interesting to see their spectrum and the contrast between their channels and then at the end of that you'll have me explain the current events you just saw in the news reports. So that's your first option. Just watch this video through and learn about Eddie Gallagher and his war crimes. Or option B, where you leave this when I tell you to, skip to 30 minutes into this video and you go watch the second half first and see what I already knew about this guy. Go through the same information I did back probably halfway through 2019, a couple months ago, and then watch the news reports armed with that information. Does this make sense, guys? Alright, I'll try to make it as straightforward as possible because that's mainly why I'm going to give this a go, because I'm really interested. Because when I was watching them I was thinking, I wonder what this would tell a person that this is the first time hearing this guy's name. Because I always wonder what questions other people ask when they're presented information. So let's give this a go. And I bet what will mainly decide what option people go for will be how far away you are from whatever you're listening to this on, and probably your internet speed. So yeah, you should obviously leave in the comments below which option you chose, or especially B, because I would just assume everyone went with A. Speaking of which, you guys, B people, off to 30 minutes. Off you go. Shoo. Go now. Meet us back at 2 minutes. Alright, it looks like the TV is almost ready. And welcome back, option B people. Alright, you're about to experience, in this order, PBS, ABC, MSNBC, CNN, and then Fox. I'll see you on the other end of it.
War and crimes. The two came to a head this weekend with a divide between the military and the commander-in-chief. William Brangham has the story.
At the center of all of this is the case of Chief Petty Officer Edward Gallagher, a highly decorated Navy SEAL. Previously, he was accused of murdering a wounded ISIS militant in Iraq in 2017 and of shooting at civilians. A court-martial acquitted him on those charges, but did convict him of posing in a photograph with the dead militant's body. Gallagher was demoted for that. But the controversy since then has been whether the Navy should mete out any further punishment, like whether he should keep his coveted status as a Navy SEAL and keep the emblem of that force, a pin showing an eagle carrying a trident and a musket. The president has routinely championed Gallagher and said that he would not allow the Navy to punish Gallagher anymore. And then, last night, the Secretary of the Navy, Richard Spencer, was forced out of his post by the Secretary of Defense, Mark Esper, over his handling of Gallagher's case. Here to walk us through this controversy is Nancy Youssef. She's a national security correspondent for the Wall Street Journal. Welcome back to the NewsHour.
Great to be with you.
Gallagher's case is over, but then Rear Admiral Green, who oversees the Navy SEALs, decides he wants to have Gallagher out of the service. He doesn't want him to be a SEAL anymore. Pick up the story from there.
Well, what he wants is to say that the military should review whether Chief Gallagher should have the distinction and the honor of being called a Navy SEAL after this case. And so he calls for a review board, and that's where peers come forward, look at the case, and decide whether he should be able to keep something called the trident pin, which sort of signifies publicly and on your uniform that you are a member of one of the most elite forces in the United States military. And I think that's what Admiral Green was trying to get at with this review process. And that after the fact that the president had restored his rank and brought back his pay was sort of the last outstanding issue vis-a-vis this case.
And so then explain the process by which the Secretary of the Navy is out.
And so what happened was there was real concern within the United States military leadership about the prospect of restoring Chief Gallagher's rank and of pardoning 2 other service members who are also accused of committing war crimes in Iraq and Afghanistan. The feeling was that once you did that and had an outside intervention, it potentially or threatened the sanctity of sort of good order and discipline that is so critical to the military. And the other fear was that if the U.S. didn't prosecute those accused of killing civilians in places like Iraq and Afghanistan, it would send a negative message to key partners. And so he was pardoned, he was his rank restored, and Secretary Spencer was among those who was really against the outside intervention.
So the Navy Secretary is pushed out by the Secretary of Defense, and in his letter sort of acknowledging his resignation, he says this, quote, "I cannot in good conscience obey an order that I believe violates the sacred oath I took." But the Secretary of Defense's problem, it seems, with the Secretary of the Navy was something other. It was about a back channel he was doing with the White House. Can you explain that?
Sure. So the Secretary of Defense, Mark Esper, came out today and said that the U.S. military leadership had agreed that they would allow the process over his trident pen to proceed, and that he learned 2 days ago that Secretary Spencer had tried to come up with a back channel deal in which the Chief Gallagher would be allowed to keep his pen regardless of the findings of the panel. And Secretary Esper said that he lost confidence in Secretary Spencer because he was usurping the existing process.
And in the middle of all of this, of course, then Eddie Gallagher goes on Fox News, which has been his champion all along and championed his case from when he was back in the brig all the way through to his, his court-martial. And Gallagher is kind of remarkably very, very critical of some of his superiors. Let's take a listen to what he said.
This is all about ego and retaliation. This has nothing to do with good order and discipline. They could have taken my trident at any time they wanted. Now they're trying to take it after the president restored my rank.
Later in that same interview, he went on to specifically, by name, criticize his superior officer, Rear Admiral Green. I mean, for people who don't appreciate this, how unusual is it for a sailor to say those things about his commanding officer? It's
extraordinarily unusual because there's a chain of command, and you're not allowed to criticize your superior in a one-on-one setting within your company, your unit, and let alone on Fox News. But I think it really gets at how much this case depended on him becoming a cause célèbre on Fox News. Sean Hannity had taken a personal interest in, but for that, it's not clear that this case would have gotten the kind of attention that it did.
Lastly, what are you hearing amongst the military community more broadly about this particular case? Does this have a lasting impact, or is this just a one and done?
No, I think it does have a lasting impact. Like most things around this case, it's become very polarized. You hear people look at Chief Gallagher as either a war hero or a war criminal. You hear about concerns about the enduring impact of what happens when the military justice system can be undone with outside intervention. There are concerns that perhaps other service members will come forward and ask for an outside intervention and seek to undo the rulings of the military court system. And so there's a real wait-and-see approach in terms of what the after effects are, the second and third order effects. There's an expectation that they will happen. And yet there are those who think that this was the president's prerogative, his right to do, and all falls within the proper chain of command. And so, like most things around this case, it has led to really polarized reactions even within the Pentagon.
Nancy Youssef of the Wall Street Journal, thank you so much.
Thank you.
To Washington now, where the Navy Secretary has been forced to resign at odds with President Trump and his Pentagon Secretary over the handling of a Navy SEAL war crimes case. Our chief global affairs anchor, Martha Raddatz, tracking all the fallout. Good morning, Martha.
Good morning, George. Navy leaders risked their jobs after publicly disagreeing with President Trump over the handling of this case, which they saw at the heart of the Navy's fundamental values and discipline. And this morning, after an extraordinary back and forth, the Navy Secretary has been fired. This morning, the Navy's top civilian official, Secretary Richard Spencer, is out of a job, forced to resign over his handling of Eddie Gallagher, the Navy SEAL acquitted by a military court of war crime charges in the killing of a teenage ISIS fighter, but convicted of posing with the dead teen's body. The Navy responding by demoting Gallagher in rank.
This is all about ego and retaliation. This has nothing to do with good order and discipline.
The controversy has pitted the Trump administration against the U.S. Navy. In his resignation letter to President Trump, Spencer writes, "I no longer share the same understanding with the commander-in-chief who appointed me in regards to the key principle of good order and discipline." The president first intervened in the case by ordering the Navy to restore Gallagher's rank and benefits. then publicly slamming the Navy for launching a review that could have stripped Gallagher of his status as a Navy SEAL, tweeting, "The Navy will not be taking away warfighter Eddie Gallagher's trident pin." The reasons for Spencer's firing differ. Defense Secretary Mark Esper says Spencer went behind his back, secretly meeting with White House officials last week, proposing to restore Gallagher's rank and allow him to retire with his trident pin if Trump did not intervene in Gallagher's review process, while publicly saying otherwise. Overnight, President Trump pointed to the Navy's handling of the Gallagher trial and Spencer's failure to address large cost overruns from past administration. Esper, in the end, saying that Gallagher could retain his trident pin.
I just want to retire peacefully with all the honors that I've earned.
ABC has learned that moments before Esper's decision, Gallagher had decided to relinquish his trident, believing his case had become too divisive. But now he will be able to keep the coveted trident despite his being convicted. George?
Okay.
Joining us now, Army veteran and Medal of Honor recipient, Colonel Jack Jacobs. He's also an MSNBC military analyst. What do you make of this, Colonel?
It is confusing. Spencer was trying to do two things, and they're diametrically opposed. He wanted to do the right thing, that is, which was make sure that Gallagher had his day in administrative court while they determined whether or not he should keep his trident. And secondly, he wanted to keep his job, which is one reason why he went around his boss to the White House. But you can't do that. The other thing you can't do is either accidentally or on purpose, publicly say that you're going to resign. I think if you want to resign, you say you're going to resign, you resign. So he's trying to do both of those things, went around the chain of command to do it, and the inevitable happened.
So at the bottom of this thing is this Navy SEAL and what he did and what should have been done about it, right? The president had one view of it. The Navy has a process by which it can make that determination. It's hard to figure out in the story who's on the right side of this.
If you talk,
what does right look like?
Well, if you talk to people who are at or near the top of the food chain, they will all tell you that they're on the side of the Secretary of the Navy. That this guy probably should have lost his trident. Don't forget that he was...
Which means being demoted.
Correct. Well, not just being demoted, but he went through a long process to become a Navy SEAL, to have that qualification removed. Don't forget that Gallagher was turned in by his own sailors, who were witnesses. He was acquitted, but at the end of the day, the Navy had decided that he didn't deserve to be a SEAL anymore. So the guy who did the right thing but the wrong way was the Secretary of the Navy. But meanwhile, recognize the fact that General Milley, who's the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, announced today or yesterday, this case is closed. General Milley wants to get this thing as far as possible in his rearview mirror and wants to move on. And the best way to do it is to say, we'll accept what the president said and be done with it.
So when you say people at the top of the food chain, for the most part, probably side with the secretary, you mean people within the military.
Oh, yeah.
For civilians, couldn't they think, well, the top of the food chain or the person in charge or in terms of chain of command is the president, and he can do what he likes?
He can do it. Just because you can do something doesn't mean that you ought to do something. And everybody I talk to says that the president's actions are inimical to order and discipline in the service.
Because there's a process, and if the process doesn't play out, then this becomes...
You got to go through the process. Well, it puts everybody in the chain of command in a bad light. It means that at any time, anybody who does anything can be overruled.
But wait, then are they both going outside the chain of command? Whether we're talking about the secretary going around his boss or the president intervening. If you're somebody who supports chain of command no matter what, which one violated that?
Well, the Secretary of the Navy violated the chain of command by going around his boss, the Secretary of Defense. But you have to ask the question whether or not whoever is at the very top of the food chain ought to be intervening in this kind of stuff when there are processes to go through it. It's a bit like the president of NBC News coming down to a segment producer and saying, you know, there's a comma that goes over here. You know, it makes sure that the system doesn't work.
Thank you, sir, for being with us. Jack Jacobs, colonel in the retired colonel in the U.S. Army and an MSNBC military analyst. Moments.
President Trump now doubling down today on his decision to reverse the demotion of Navy SEAL Eddie Gallagher. By the way, he was convicted of discrediting the armed forces after posing next to the body of a dead ISIS fighter. Now, Gallagher was facing expulsion from the SEALs, but the president put a stop to that and ordered the return of his trident, which is a symbol, a pin that symbolizes membership in the elite force. Now, controversy surrounding this case actually led to the Secretary of the Navy being forced out just yesterday. I want to bring in Timothy Parlatore, who is Gallagher's attorney. Welcome to the show, Timothy. I'm glad you're here. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
I have to ask you, why should your client, Eddie Gallagher, have received special treatment from the President of the United States instead of letting the military review process actually run its course without any interference?
Well, that's easy, because the military justice process has demonstrated itself repeatedly in this case to be completely flawed. Right from the beginning, we had misconduct from investigators, prosecutors. Prosecutors and investigators were committing crimes, illegally tracking me, other members of the media, other attorneys. And in fact, the lead prosecutor was kicked off the case. So for the president to just sit back and say, okay, let's let the process that has already demonstrated itself to be failing in this case to just play out, I don't think that that's necessarily a call that he had to make.
Now, Timothy, it's a little bit foreboding what you've just said, because, of course, one of the critiques that people have pushed back on is the idea of the military justice system being villainized in this way. And you've just called it essentially this conspiracy-based or this, problematic institution. Is that fair overall? I mean, think about the countries that are hosting the American troops.
Well, I think that in this case, we certainly have demonstrated that the UCMJ, as written, is something that was appropriate many years ago but needs to be updated. The way that it was used and abused in this case really shows problems. You had a prosecutor who went completely rogue, and he went out and committed crimes to try and get a wrongful conviction. And in the end, we went to a trial. They presented evidence. They didn't have it. He was convicted of a single count of being in a photo with a terrorist, that every single member of his platoon was also in that photo. And every single member of the platoon also went out and took individual photos with that terrorist, including the lieutenant, Tom McNeil. And yet, Eddie Gallagher seems to be the only one they want to hold accountable for this.
Well, the former Navy Secretary Richard Spencer was actually on CBS News tonight, and he reacted to the president, saying he had to protect his warfighters like Gallagher. Watch this.
I don't think he really understands the full definition of a warfighter. A warfighter is a profession of arms. And a profession of arms has standards that they have to be held to, and they hold themselves to.
So what's your reaction to his statement? Is this send a signal by the president that something like posing for a photo with the corpse of an ISIS fighter, which your client was convicted of doing, and you say others as well were involved, is that okay? Is that the right message?
I think what it sends is that when you have somebody like Chief Gallagher, who did pose for a photo with a dead body, who had his kids dragged out of their house at gunpoint in their underwear by NCIS, was thrown in a cell for 6 months, surrounded by pedophiles and child molesters, such that when his kids came to visit him, they had to wear robes so the other inmates wouldn't get aroused. Then has his name and face plastered all over the media worldwide, has his pay taken away. All the president did was give him his rank back so he could retire after he was cleared of all these serious charges. So to say that by giving him his rank back and allowing him to keep his pin is somehow giving him a pass, I think that ignores the facts of this case. He suffered tremendously.
Well, your client was actually on Fox yesterday calling out Rear Admiral Colin Green. Now, he's the commander who ordered the military review. Let's take a look.
I just get a feeling of embarrassment for my community that Admiral Green is letting the ego get the best of him at this point, and he's trying to take my trident because it's all about retaliation.
Now, he also accused Spencer of meddling. Is that appropriate for someone in the military to speak out against leadership like that? I mean, what about the chain of command that's so inherent in the military? What do you think?
Exactly, and that's part of the problem with this case, is you had former Secretary Spencer from back in November of last year reaching out to people personally to peddle a false story about there being a video of this murder, to try and convince them do not assist Gallagher, trying to prevent them from helping him to get competent legal counsel, putting his thumb on the scale throughout. NCIS, the agency that committed the crimes in the illegal email tracking investigation and the totally failed investigation, they report directly to Secretary Spencer. They're outside of the military chain of command. So the person who is supposed to hold them responsible is Secretary Spencer. He failed to do so. And for him to come out now and make this speech where essentially what he's doing is he's repeating canned lines out of a leadership textbook from the Naval Academy instead of actually identifying specific issues. I mean, it's revisionist, it's defensive, it's unbelievable.
Timothy Parlatore, thank you for being here. I appreciate your time.
Thank you for having me.
I'm joined now by retired Navy Rear Admiral John Kirby. Now, hi, John. I'm glad that you're here. Thank you for being here tonight.
Thank you.
Especially on a night like this when we're hearing about this information. You heard Officer Gallagher's attorney speaking, and he says his client is really the one who's been victimized here. What's your response?
There's no question that the Navy prosecutorial team did not exactly crown itself with glory, Laura, when they conducted a court-martial trial for him for this alleged murder. It's clear there was prosecutorial misconduct, and they've paid a price for that. And of course, Chief Gallagher was acquitted on the worst charges. But what's forgotten here is he was convicted of the crime of posing with the corpse of a dead ISIS fighter, which is a violation of the Uniform Code of Military Justice. And there were other sailors, other SEALs, as the lawyer just said, who also were posed in that picture and also been held to account. As a matter of fact, three of those SEALs were with Chief Gallagher going through this administrative review process to see if they could keep their trident pin. And so now those three cases are kind of thrown up in the air because the president has weighed in and said that Gallagher can keep his pin. So now the Navy's left to figure out what they're going to do with these other three.
So what's the deal with the pin? I mean, I keep hearing about the trident. Help us unpack for the American people. Sure. It sounds trite. It obviously is not. Tell us why.
No, it's not trite. So there are four main warfighting communities in the Navy: aviators, submariners, surface warfare officers, which I was a long time ago, and Navy SEALs. Each of those warfare communities has a special device that you wear on your chest above your ribbons, a gold device that indicates that you are a qualified member in that warfare community. The trident is a very well-known, a very famous warfare device that designates you as a Navy SEAL. And it has significance, not just from a cultural perspective, but also from a performance and a capability perspective. So it's clearly, I mean, I certainly understand why Chief Gallagher would want to be able to retire with that trident. Any Navy SEAL who's gone through the incredible crucible of training to become a Navy SEAL wants to earn that coveted pin and keep that coveted pin. But I would also tell you, Laura, that this process that he was going through, it's a peer review process that the SEALs have been doing for many, many years. And there are, dozens, if not hundreds, every year of SEALs that their trident pins are revoked from them because of poor conduct, ethics violations, or other performance issues. So this is a very typical process, very normal process. It's a functional process, and it really should have been left to the SEALs to determine whether Gallagher got to keep his pin or not.
And yet it was not. The President of the United States has weighed in and has doubled down. Admiral Kirby, thank you for your time and explaining this to us all. Something tells me it's not going to end here.
No, I don't think it will. Because look, I mean, not just for the SEALs, because we got three others that have to go through this process, we think, but look at the Army, Laura. He pardoned Major Goldstein, another one of these individuals who was going through a court-martial, hadn't even been through trial yet. His case had not even been heard by a jury. He was alleged to have killed another prisoner that was in detention, a Taliban prisoner, excuse me. Anyway, he had never gone through court-martial, and the president pardoned him. And now the Army is going through a similar review process to see if he can keep the Silver Star that he won in that engagement, as well as his Ranger tab, which is a very similar thing to a trident pin. It's a warfare designation inside the Army. So the Army's watching this Navy case very closely because they're next in the chute.
Admiral Kirby, thank you for your time, as always.
We are back with a Fox News alert. President Trump intervening on behalf of 3 U.S. service members accused or convicted of war crimes. The president issued pardons to Army officers Matthew Goldstein and Clint Lawrence and restored the rank of Navy SEAL Eddie Gallagher, a highly decorated special operator who worked tirelessly to clear his name after being accused and eventually acquitted of war crimes last July. Chief Petty Officer Eddie Gallagher joins us now. Chief, thank you so much for being on the program. Congratulations. Your initial reaction when you got a phone call from the President of the United States that you're going to get your rank back?
It was pretty surreal, to get a phone call from the White House and have them tell you that the president is on the line for you. So I had a feeling that it was coming because, you know, the president has shown the nation that he's been a man of his word this whole time since he took office, and it was just overwhelming. It was a feeling of joy and gratitude to be able to speak to him and to hear what the decision that he was making from his mouth.
Chief, can you share a little bit of what the president said to you?
Sure. He, you know, he was very easy to talk to. He got on the phone. He cracked a joke with me. He saw me at the Veterans Day Parade in New York in the crowd, and then he proceeded to tell me that he thanked me for my service, and then told me that he was going to be restoring my rank back to Chief Petty Officer, and also expunging everything from my record so that I could retire honorably, and that, you know, basically it was like this thing had never happened.
Boy, that's an even bigger thing, to expunge it all and say, hey, like this never happened. You're going to get an opportunity to retire if you so choose, with all the honors that you've earned through your service to our country. What does he understand about your situation, about our warfighters, that brings him to make these kind of decisions, do you believe?
You know, he knew a lot about my situation, and knew a lot about all the injustices that went on during, you know, this whole ordeal that I went through. We talked about, you know, the prosecutors, Chris Chaplack, who was, you know, spying on my defense team. He, you know, said that if that would happen in New York, you know, those people would have been arrested. And then he also went into, you know, Corey Scott, the SEAL who stood up and took ownership of what really happened. Pretty much, you know, he told me that he wanted to instill confidence back into the warfighters of our community that were, you know, going over there and doing the job, and he didn't want them second-guessing themselves, and he wanted them to know that, you know, he had a president who had their back.
It's amazing. You mentioned all the warfighters. Well, as you know, First Lieutenant Clinton Lawrence was released from prison the very same day, got a phone call from the president, as well as Matthew Goldstein, Green Beret, also got that phone call and was cleared. We had Matt on the program yesterday. Here's what he said. Listen.
I think it sends a clear signal that the President of the United States is paying attention, that he's not going to be backed off by, you know, institutional elements of the DOD that are going to try to, you know, retain their ability to do certain things and force outcomes and weaponize the military justice process and then hide behind process.
Do you feel the same way? Do you feel like the military justice system is in some ways broken?
Oh, it definitely is broken. It's a system that needs to be fixed, and that's what I plan on doing when I finally retire. I'm going to start a nonprofit and help warfighters that are going through similar ordeals that I went through, and then also use that as a platform to speak out on justice reform in the military.
Very cool. Continue to give back. Hey, briefly, if you would, Eddie, how's your family doing? How's your wife after all of this?
She is overjoyed. You know, it's like a huge weight that is just taken off our shoulders. I don't think that it has fully sunk in since we got the news yesterday or the day before yesterday. We're still sort of, you know, on cloud 9 about it. But I can tell you that, you know, my family is completely, you know, grateful for this decision. And then we are, you know, I'll be returning back to work tomorrow. Putting in for retirement. Unfortunately, I'll be returning in a defensive posture because I'm expecting full retaliation from my command.
Wow, that is, well, keep us posted if that indeed happens. They're messing with the prerogative of the Commander-in-Chief. Eddie Gallagher, thank you so much for your time this morning. And I want to note we'll have Clinton Lawrence on the program tomorrow. More Fox and Friends on the other side.
I imagine you could see why I put them in that order. So yeah, they're mainly about how Richard Spencer has been forced out of his position as Navy Secretary. And now I'm going to take you back in time to a video I made months ago. Oh well, I guess if you are Group B and you finally finish your journey through all this, thanks for watching, like, subscribe, I'll see you next time. Leave a comment below on if you see what I was doing here. And yeah, that weird mid-video ending. But anyways, Come along, Group A people. As much of a mindfuck as it is, let's go meet Group B people at the 30-minute mark, and we will go through the first time I heard about this Eddie Gallagher character and the context in which I learnt about him and what I learnt about him. Let's do this. Ah yes, no matter how you got to this point, I'm sure it's been a crazy ride. Welcome, Group B people. Can we just take a moment to appreciate some of the cook shit that Group A people would have to have heard me say by now? But yeah, obviously this little weird experiment video I've got going here is A, testing out something new. B, asking myself the question, do I want them to watch the video clips with the information, or do I want to fill them in at the end? Just trying to have my cake and eat it too, guys, okay? But no, this also just plays on the whole. You can't expect everyone to know everything that you know. Try to keep that as a big principle of this channel. So I thought we'll try and look a little bit further into that and how crazy American TV is. That stuff is off its lips. Oh, why didn't I get my head out of the way? And once I've finished this laptop here, this kind of wonky laptop, we can have a little scroll down. Going back to like April, May, halfway through this year, I made a video about war crimes, right after I made a video about Julian Assange. So I found this article which was perfect in timing and subject matter. The title of it was Navy SEALs were warned against reporting their chief for war crimes. I didn't read really any of this in that video titled War Crimes, but I'll read through the majority of it, highlighting key bits and giving you the gist, because I read it while I was making that video, I just didn't include it all. So then Group B people can go back armed with everything I knew and watch those news reports and probably make the same faces I made. New York Times by Dave Phillips on the 23rd of April in 2019. Stabbing a defenseless teenage captive to death, picking off a school-age girl and an old man from a sniper's roost, indiscriminately spraying neighborhoods with rockets and machine gun fire. Navy SEAL commandos from Team 7 Alpha Platoon said they've seen their highly decorated platoon chief commit shocking acts in Iraq, and they had spoken up repeatedly, but their frustration grew as months passed and they saw no sign of official action. Tired of being brushed off, 7 members of the platoon called a private meeting with their troop commander in March 2018 at a naval base near San Diego. According to a confidential Navy criminal investigation report obtained by the New York Times, they gave him the bloody details and asked for the formal investigation. But instead of launching an investigation that day, the troop commander and his senior enlisted aide, both longtime comrades of the accused platoon leader, Special Operations Chief Edward Gallagher, warned the 7 platoon members that speaking out could cost them and others their careers, according to the report. The clear message one of the 7 told investigators was, stop talking about it. The platoon members eventually forced the referral of the concerns to authorities outside of the SEALs, and Chief Gallagher now faces a court-martial with his trial set to begin May 28. Alright, already you can see like a heavy theme of whistleblowers getting screwed over. These guys wanted to let people know that they thought this guy was dangerous or breaking the rules, and they were just told to shut up and get back in line. And yeah, that seems to be like a big focus in this article. According to the investigation report, the troop commander, Lieutenant Commander Robert Bryce, said in the meeting that while the SEALs were free to report the killing, the Navy might not look kindly on rank-and-file team members making allegations against the chief. Their careers could be sidetracked, he said, and their elite status revoked, referring to the Eagle and Trident badges worn by SEALs. He said the Navy will pull your birds. The enlisted aide, Master Chief Petty Officer Brian Alazawi, warned them that the frag radius, the area damaged by an explosion, from a war crime investigation of Chief Gallagher could be wide enough to take down a lot of other SEALs as well, the report said. Navy SEALs are regarded as the most elite commando force in the American military, but that reputation has been blotted repeatedly in the recent years by investigations of illegal beatings, killings and theft, and reports of drug use in the ranks. In January, the top commander of the SEALs ordered a 90-day review of the force's culture and training. The results have not yet been made public. As Chief Gallagher's men were sounding an alarm about killings in Iraq, his superiors were lavishing praise on him. An evaluation quoted in the investigation report called Chief Gallagher the best chief of the 12 in the team and said, "This is the man I want leading SEALs into combat." A few days after the March 2018 meeting, the chief was awarded a Bronze Star for valor under fire in Iraq. A month later, the 7 platoon members finally succeeded in spurring their commanders to formally report the killings of the 3 Iraqis to the Navy Criminal Investigation Service by threatening to go directly to the top Navy brass and to the news media. Chief Gallagher was arrested in September on more than a dozen charges, including premeditated murder and attempted murder. If convicted, he could face life in prison. He has pleaded not guilty and denies all of the charges. So you kind of get a feel for the culture that they've got going here in the SEALs and how you're not meant to step out of rank. That's definitely not what you're meant to do. So it's a bit of a big deal what these 7 platoon members went to do. The Navy has charged Chief Gallagher's immediate superior, Lieutenant Jacob Portier, with failing to report the chief's possibly criminal actions and with destroying evidence. Lieutenant Portier has pleaded not guilty, though his lawyer, he too, declined to be interviewed. The investigation report indicates that a number of other highly ranking SEALs also knew about the allegations against the chief and did not report them, but no one else has been charged in the case. Chief Gallagher learned of the March 2018 meetings soon after it happened, the report indicates, and he began working to turn other SEALs against the accusers. "I just got word these guys went crying to the wrong person," Chief Gallagher wrote to a fellow chief in one of hundreds of text messages included in the report. To another he wrote, "The only thing we can do as the good team guys is pass on the word on those traitors. They are not brothers at all." Citing his text, the Navy kept the chief in the brig to await trial, as it is believed that he has been trying to intimidate witnesses and undermine the investigation. He denies that accusation as well. The chief's wife, Andrea Gallagher, and his brother Shane Gallagher have appeared repeatedly on Fox News and other news outlets, calling the chief a hero and demanding his release. They say the allegations against Chief Gallagher were concocted by disgruntled subordinates who could not meet his demanding standards and wanted to get rid of him. A website soliciting donations for his defense says it has raised $375,000, and a prominent Veterans Appeal marketer is selling free Eddie t-shirts. See, now Fox News plays a huge role in this. Like, they definitely are a game changer in this. The SEALs in the platoon did not respond to requests for interviews for this article. Their names and those of others who have not been identified publicly in court have been withheld from this article at the request of the Navy because of the covert nature of their work. A spokeswoman for the Naval Special Warfare Commander Tamara Lawrence said that while they are commandos, SEALs are still expected to follow the same law as all the other troops, adding it's called Special Operations, not different operations. The investigation report said several members of the platoon told investigators that Chief Gallagher showed little regard for the safety of the team members or for the lives of civilians. Their mission was to advise Iraqi forces and provide assistance with snipers and drones, but they said the chief wanted instead to clear houses and start firefights. He would order them to take what seemed to be needless risks and to fire rockets at houses for no apparent reason, they said. He routinely parked an armored truck on a Tigris River bridge and emptied the truck's heavy machine gun into neighborhoods on the other side with no discriminable targets, according to one senior SEAL. Chief Gallagher's job was to plan and oversee missions for the platoon, but the platoon member said that he spent much of his time in a hidden perch with a sniper rifle, firing 3 or 4 times as often as other platoon snipers. They said he boasted about the numbers of people he killed, including women. Photos from the deployment that were stored on a hard drive seized by the Navy showed that the chief aimed sniper rifles and rocket launchers from rooftops of the city. 2 SEAL snipers told investigators that the other day from his sniper's nest, Chief Gallagher shot a girl in a flower hijab who was walking with other girls on the riverbank. One of the snipers said he watched through his scope as she dropped, clutching her stomach, and the other girls dragged her away. Another day, 2 other snipers said the chief shot an unarmed man in a white robe with a wispy white beard. They said the man fell with a red blotch spreading on his back. Before the 2017 deployment, Chief Gallagher ordered a hatchet and a hunting knife, both handmade by a SEAL veteran named Andrew Arborito, with whom he had served. Text messages show. Hatchets have become an unofficial SEAL symbol, and some operators carry and use them on deployments. Chief Gallagher told Mr. Arborito in a text message shortly after arriving in Iraq, "I'll try to dig that knife or hatchet into somebody's skull." On the morning of May 4th, 2017, Iraqi troops brought an Islamic State fighter who had been wounded in the leg in battle, SEALs told investigators, and Chief Gallagher responded over the radio with words to the effect of, "He's mine." The SEALs estimated that the captive would have been about 15 years old. A video clip shows the youth struggling to speak, but SEAL medics told investigators that his wounds had not appeared life-threatening. A medic was treating the youth on the ground when Chief Gallagher walked up without a word and stabbed the wounded teenager several times in the neck and once in the chest with his hunting knife, killing him, 2 SEAL witnesses said. Iraqi officers who were at the scene told Navy investigators that they did not see the captive died and disputed the stabbing account, saying it seemed out of character for the chief. Minutes after the death, Chief Gallagher and his commanding officers, Lieutenant Poiter, gathered some nearby SEALs for a re-enlistment ceremony, snapping photos of the platoon standing over the body. In recent years, photos of re-enlistment ceremonies in unusual circumstances, while scuba diving or skydiving, for instance, have gone viral on social media. The chief's variation would have reinforced his image as a hard-charging pirate, one SEAL said. A week later, records show that Chief Gallagher texted a picture of the dead captive to a fellow SEAL in California saying, "Good story behind this one, got him with my hunting knife." But his platoon did not see it as a good story, according to the investigation report. The SEALs called a platoon meeting and discussed how to keep the chief away from anybody he could harm. When senior platoon members confronted Chief Gallagher about the captive's death, they said he told them, "Don't worry about it, they do a lot worse to us." I think that's probably the most important part of this article I wanted to show you. And almost done, there's one last lot. Now remember, I was trying to use this article to tie in my previous video about whistleblowing and stuff of that nature to the video this was in about war crimes, so I was coming at it from that angle. Alright, final bit. Oh, I guess this is when I should recommend going back and watching that video I did on war crimes, and the one before it on Julian Assange. I reckon I did a decent job, I think. The SEALs told investigators they reported the killings to Lieutenant Poiter that night and at other times during the deployment, but the lieutenant took no action. They said the lieutenant had trained under Chief Gallagher at Buds and idolized him. Members of the platoon hoped the chief would be replaced when they returned home from Iraq in August 2017, according to the report. It didn't happen. The report said they spoke repeatedly to the Lieutenant Superiors, Commander Reich, and to Master Chief Al-Wazi and another Team 7 Master Chief, but they were told to decompress and let it go. Each member of the SEALs team had a duty to report wrongdoings as soon as possible, said Lawrence Brennan, a retired Navy captain and military lawyer who now teaches law at Fordham University, but he added, "The willingness of an institution to turn a blind eye is common. It is especially true in warfare communities," he said, "and the SEALs, you don't just keep them in your family, you keep them in your immediate family." Alright, I'll finish quoting the article there. Now, what's the takeaway I had from this? Well, this guy is a pretty fucked up guy, sees the world in a pretty fucked up way, and he does some pretty fucked up things. War criminal. And with the way the US military is perceived and the attitude they have towards it, and just the cultures, especially in like something like the Navy SEALs, it seems like to come out against one of your superiors is that much of a head fuck. You wouldn't just be doing it for fun. With the amount of backlash and how your career and reputation is on the line, the people that came forward against this guy really put a lot on the line and had to fight tooth and nail because they were constantly ignored. And apparently a winning strategy for a war criminal is make your case on Fox News, and then your Oompa Loompa US president would probably feel bad for you and be all like, "Oh, they don't like you doing fucked up shit. They don't like me doing fucked up shit either, son. Oh, mate, consider yourself pardoned." Alright, I should wrap this up-ish. Oh, that's right. If you are Group B, go back to 2 minutes in and go watch these more recent news reports on how this is all unfolded. Get. Group A people, true champions. I promise if you don't unsubscribe, I'll never do this again. I guess you could become a new group of people. Will be Group C, which will be the ones that sat through the whole first bit and the second bit and went, hang on, and went to watch the first bit again. And yeah, I'll wrap this up here. Thanks for watching and following along, I guess. As you can tell, I just really freaking don't like war criminals. Fuck those guys. But you, the lovely viewer, I hope you have a lovely day. Like, subscribe, leave a comment below, and I'll see you next time.